everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the session, Growing Your Staffing Business by Developing Successful Vendor Partnerships with MSPs. For this session, Ceipal is joined by David Ballew, founder and CEO of Nimble, Cheryl Tracz, principal consultant at Tracz Consulting, and James Lucier, executive vice president at ProcureWise. But before we launch into today's session, there's a few housekeeping items to cover. First, each session will be recorded and available on demand on Ceipal's website. A follow-up email will be sent to all registrants with the recording and any other relevant material. Audience questions can be placed in the Q&A tab or session chat window. Our speakers will try to address them by the conclusion of the session. If there's not enough time to address all of the questions, our speakers will work with us to publish a Q&A as a follow-up. And that's it. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. David is the founder and CEO of Nimble, headquartered in London, as a global contingent workforce and talent acquisition leader, published professional and dynamic public speaker. Cheryl started Tracz Consulting in 2019 to provide vendor-neutral approach for enterprise organizations to make smarter, faster, and more strategic decisions regarding their non-employee workforce. And James Lucier is Executive Vice President of ProcureWise. He is responsible for executing go-to-market strategies, building client-driven growth, and driving the success of ProcureWise. And with that, over to you, James.
Thank you, Spring. Hello, David. Hello, Cheryl.
Hello. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. So, we're coming near the end of our program. We have our audience still here. If you've been in the audience today, you know that some of our sessions are 35 or 45 minutes. This is 30 minutes. We're going to fly through a lot of information because this is a really important discussion. A large part of our audience are staffing firms, and they're really interested in how they can develop MSP partnerships. With MSPs they're already working with, how can they develop that partnership with MSPs they're not working with, right? And when I say develop a partnership, I mean, real business opportunities. But I think the discussion's also important to MSPs that are on and to corporate clients, HR practitioners, talent acquisition, leaders of contingent workforces, because we're going to be talking about some things of, how to evaluate your staffing supplier, right? And what to look for when you want to make changes in your supply base where a supplier can have an impact for you, because that's really the only way for a staffing firm to develop relationships. I think we're going to go through, right? Is competency-based relationships. So just to get started, so that our audience understands the perspective here that you have, each of you have, Cheryl and David, can you just please just briefly tell us a little bit about your perspective in working either with clients or MSPs or staffing firms that really has helped you kind of develop this insight into how staffing firms can build those relationships. Cheryl?
Absolutely. So I feel like I'm uniquely positioned in this. So previous to consulting, I started consulting 3 years ago. I had built a 18-year-long career with managed service providers, building programs, implementing programs. And finally, my last role was as a director of supplier partnership for a mid-sized managed service provider. So I was responsible for developing our go-to-market strategy with our suppliers, facilitating the RFPs, RFIs, that kind of thing, but also developing a supplier partnership program. So that insight has now helped me as I'm consulting on trying to get under the covers of what the clients are looking for, whether those clients are clients or MSPs, when responding to RFPs. So I kind of have a fox in the henhouse perspective, having run RFPs and now responding to them.
Okay. Thank you, Cheryl. David?
Yeah, interesting, similar to Cheryl. So my 25 plus years in this business have all been focused in the MSP world, and even more specifically on the supply base and supplier relations perspective, managing hundreds and hundreds of suppliers all over the world. I think where suppliers really need to focus is, especially with the changes in the industry that are happening, like it's not the same as it was even 4 or 5 years ago. The whole industry is shifting. So really what you need to be looking at is building the relationships specifically with not just the local reps that you're working with within each one of these MSPs, but also at a much higher level throughout the organization of the MSP. And we'll talk, I think, a little bit more about this later, but there's churn and people come and people go, and the MSP organizations are in constant change, as well as the client in constant change. So I think having the relationship at multiple levels and multiple depths within the MSP is really important.
Well, great. Thank you for sharing that. So let's just get right into it, right? Staffing firms that want to grow their business with MSPs, which also means there are end clients there, right? What's the starting point? What's the first thing they should think about?
So I think the first thing they should think about is if the organization, the end client, aligns to their capabilities. And then looking a step further to see if the partnership with the MSP is advantageous to them. I think one of the things is looking at and seeing if you can uncover what services that MSP is providing to the end client. Are they also the payroll provider? Are they doing any direct sourcing? Is their direct sourcing a part of the program? So really understanding what the structure of that program is before assuming that you're automatically a fit for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, David. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I completely agree with that. I also think, though, you need to be very selective. And what we find, many of the staffing agencies, they try to go out and get as many MSP clients as they can, right? And it's, like, okay, let's take a minute here. Let's really talk about where you want to be and what you want to do. And, I agree with Cheryl. It's very important to be very clear on what your capabilities are and what skills you're actually going to support. I think that's very important. But you also need to think about your sourcing budget. So you only have so many dollars to apply. And where are you going to put that budget where you're going to get a return on that investment? So then it becomes a financial decision of looking at each one of your MSP partners to say, okay, where are we getting the results? Where are we actually going to a P&L level at the client, at the MSP level, to say, okay, where are we making our money? Because you are in business to make money, and it's important that staffing firms take a step back and say, you know what, it's okay to make a profit, and the MSPs are going to do their best to manage cost. That's what they're hired to do. One of the reasons why they bring on an MSP is to manage cost. We get that. But at the same time, it needs to be in balance with the supply chain. And so the suppliers the staffing firms really need to be aware of where their recruitment dollars are going. What is their recruiter capacity? Can they support the programs they're trying to take on, specifically for the skill sets, like Cheryl said? And do you have candidate resources that you can actually make placements? Right. So it's a balance, really.
Really good point. Both of you made really good points. Anecdotally, I am connecting it to what I've heard over the last year from a lot of staffing firm leaders. We're always hearing, more clients, more programs, more logos, right? Of course, everybody wants more, but I've heard from a lot of firms over the last year, we added more new clients than ever. And I've asked, okay, well, how's it going with them? And, the response for a lot of them, David, is that there really hasn't, there's been a lot of jobs to work on, but there haven't been a lot of placements. And so what looks like opportunity becomes a financial drain, like you're talking about. And Cheryl, maybe it started out because it was this pursuit of a client, but not one that was really in alignment. So when you are looking for alignment, right, what specific types of things, should you look for, Cheryl?
I think it's the partnership of the organization. So partnership of the organization specifically related to the MSP. If you have, to David's point earlier, developing relationships across the MSP, if you've got a list of 5 clients through that MSP and you're doing well on 4 of them, what's going wrong with the 5th one? Look at thyself first, and then look to the MSP, and you expand across that and say, we're really struggling at ABC client. Are you guys struggling? What's going on there? Trying to get to the root cause of the issue. To your point, it doesn't help to bring in a 6th client if you're struggling at the 5th one, and it's going to be exactly like the 5th one.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's this risk, right, of adding clients with any particular MSP and not performing in those clients, David, right? Like if you're really looking at, even if it's not a P&L, but your own scorecard or performance record within a client, and that client's working with an MSP, 10 years ago, maybe that wouldn't have hurt you like it does today, because information's now available and shared easily across programs within an MSP, right?
Yeah, I think it's critical to have reasonable expectations walking into the relationship. And and this is what we help staffing firms do, is set up their growth strategy. So when you are going to engage with a specific MSP, you want to think bigger and not just about the account that you've just entered. You want to look at the MSP and say, are they winning new business with other clients? Mm-hmm. Are they losing business with other clients? Are they losing MSP programs? Because if they are, maybe that's not the MSP you want to be partnering with. So if there are MSPs that are growing via acquisition, I call it the Pac-Man approach, the old Pac-Man game. They go out and buy up programs, but they're not necessarily growing because they are performing. So as a staffing vendor, you need to think in terms of, this is a partnership with this MSP, much larger than the account that we're just supporting here. How can we grow with them? And are they growing?
Well, and conversely, there's also several staffing suppliers that are trying to play or are playing in the MSP space now. So they were really good performers at one of their customers. Their customer said, we need help in managing their vendors, and they raised their hand to do it. So I'm not saying that that's a bad partnership, but it's something that the supplier needs to look at and evaluate before they just blindly sign up to join. Mm-hmm. Is understand what the rules of engagement are going to be. Is that vendor that's coming in, are they a master vendor? Are they getting all of the jobs? Is it vendor neutral? Are they competing? What does that mix look like? And is it going to be valuable for your organization to join?
So since we have a 30-minute session, rather than wait for Q&A at the end, because we'll just run out of time. As I see a question that might apply to the conversation that we're in the middle of, I'm just going to ask it, okay? And one does right now, because I think both of you have said something, find something out about the MSP. Are they winning programs? Find something out about the MSP or, relationship with this specific client, right? Are they also maybe their strategic staffing supplier too? So we have a question, how do you find that out?
Well, I think, go ahead, David.
Go.
I think you talk with the resource that you're pursuing. You try to identify their peers. You also speak with your peers. And worst case scenario, you can engage a consultant who's familiar with the space and can come and help you.
Yeah, I was going to say, the staffing industry is a very small world. We call it musical chairs. People move around, and all you have to do is put a question out there. Staffing firms, account managers, they all talk to each other. They know exactly which accounts are good and which accounts, quite frankly, are not, where you really want to focus your time and energy. And again, back to your finances, your resources, right? So yeah, it's putting the right question out and asking the question. You'll get the answer.
Yeah.
But you need to listen to the answer.
So I'm hearing, we didn't say it exactly this way, but, start with a strategy.
Yeah.
Right. And as part of that strategy, when you're thinking about executing that, now we're looking at, we have to identify, MSPs and end clients that we're going to be a good partner for, mm-hmm. because we're going to have to prove that at some point too. Right. Do your homework. The information's out there somewhere. One of the ways maybe to set yourself apart a little bit, sometimes when you can, from someone else, is to work a little harder, to do a little more homework, to show that you're a little more interested. What kind of great partner you're going to be if you don't demonstrate that you have really any interest by having done any homework, right? Makes sense. So, we talked about, we kind of set up some bullet points to get ready for this conversation. And one of the bullet points we talk about, well, what about the actual selling part into it? What about the selling part? Listen, regardless of the number that you look at, there's a huge number of staffing firms. There's a large number in most programs. There's a number many times greater than that of staffing firms that are targeting that program. right? So when you're selling into it, when you're the staffing firm selling into it, and you can approach this as a staffing firm that is, already there on the supplier list or not, and trying to get in. Well, what does that look like? What are some of the things that you need to, lots of staffing firms, if you think of sales collateral and things like that, it's the me, myself, and I. Here's what our staffing firm does. And we have 10 awards and we've got this and we've got that and we've got this and we've got that and we've got, but it looks like everybody else's presentation, right? How do you sell differently? How do you sell yourself apart?
One of those components is your relationship, selling to David or selling to James, but doing it over an extended period of time and building your network and your rapport with them. One of the staffing suppliers I consult to now, I remember even before I was consulting, just saying, you're going to get on staffing lists because people trust you. Just build in your relationship with them, be patient, and it'll grow. And now his firm is growing like everybody's right now, but it's growing because he was patient, waited for the right opportunities, and met with the right people.
Yeah. Our focus is really on the strategy, right? Again, you keep going back to strategy, and it needs to be a multi-parallel work streams, right? So oftentimes what we find in having our initial conversations with staffing firms is that they have an account manager. The account manager goes in and meets with the HR representative on a weekly or biweekly or monthly basis. And they have it well documented. They know exactly what they're doing, but clearly it's not working because they're not getting the growth numbers that they need to be receiving. So we tend to look at it and say, okay, we need to mix this up a little bit. Multiple work streams at multiple levels. The president of the company needs to have a relationship with the highest level possible at the client, right on down, all the way down to the recruitment level. And you need to know your audience when you're walking in and having these conversations, because the value that if your conversations with the MSP, they're more interested in perhaps your performance. Whereas if you're having a conversation with procurement within the organization, they might be more interested in price. Mm-hmm. So you really need to understand the audience, but you also need to have a multi-channel sales activity going on within your strategy, not just the old school single path.
Right. So thank you. Really great information. We're going to stay maybe one more question in this area. I'm just doing us a quick time check for us. We have about 11 minutes. We're good halfway in. Lots of great information coming out. One of the ways to get in, we'll say, into a program, into a new client relationship with an existing or new MSP partnership is by an RFI or an RFP, right? Very common. Maybe even more so a lot today. Staffing firms are really being evaluated closely and being vetted. What do I have to do as a staffing firm to prepare for that? To really make a good showing, right? Maybe what do I have to do to prepare, and what do I have to do when I complete it?
Absolutely. I think the first thing to do when you get the opportunity to participate in an RFI, RFP is make sure you know what their objectives are. Is it coming from procurement? Is it price driven? Is it coming because they've got a gap in their coverage and you have that skill set? So I wouldn't even pursue an RFI, RFP unless I could answer those questions. Furthermore, as you start to answer them, make sure your answers are concise yet uniquely positioned. It's hard to do that sometimes in the staffing firm and the staffing world, but make sure you're keying in on those key components that we just talked about that that they're looking for. Is it price? Is it a unique offering? And what specifically are you offering different from someone else?
David, what do you have to say about the RFIs and RFPs?
Yeah, Cheryl's spot on with that. But also, I'm a firm believer, if you do not have a relationship, it takes a lot of investment of time and energy and effort and capacity of your resources to go out and respond to these. It's quite frankly, some may disagree, but it's quite easy to go out and get an RFI or an RFP or to get on that list to receive them. That's not the difficult part. The difficult part is actually winning. And our data shows that winning requires a relationship. If you are going in blind and you don't have a relationship with this client at some level with someone, you need to focus your efforts and your energies and your finances somewhere else. I think that's really important. And if you do respond, like Cheryl says, important to have your differentiators. I also think it's really important to approach with really a spirit of compromise. The MSP is going to be coming and asking you questions. The client's going to be asking you questions. And you need to be very flexible in how you approach your response. But I agree, you need to be very targeted. Forget the fluff. Be very direct and succinct and to the point, and leverage whatever good performance track record you have, even if it's not within an MSP. If you are, and you should be maintaining as a staffing firm, maintaining your internal performance metrics, right? So that story should be a really great story to tell. Whether or not that's an MSP KPI or not, they're going to be parallel and lined up with the MSP's KPIs. So what you're already measuring is of value. So don't worry about the fact that you don't have MSP experience. That's not the point here. The point is that you can perform, you can show the documentation that you perform well, and then submit that in and see where you go.
I think important to point out things you should not do as well.
Okay. Yes.
So do not have standardized answers. Standardized answers are, how long has the company been around? Who are going to be my account managers? I've seen a couple RFP responses where it's been insert client name here because they forgot to check it. That's bad. Okay. Don't lie on the RFP. I had a situation where we required that a staffing supplier have a physical location. We showed up and it was someone's personal home. So make sure you're providing accurate information specific to locations and also references. It's a very small world. Everybody is like Kevin Bacon and only 6 degrees away. So make sure that if you're putting someone's name down, they know that you're putting their name down and they're willing to provide you with a positive response.
So don't lie covers embellishment and the like, right?
Exactly. Absolutely.
I think, more so that, again, I think it's different today than some years back. The vetting is right. Mm-hmm. There's stronger vetting. Absolutely. And people look, like you said, you looked for the location. Is this real or not? Okay. Well, I'm hearing about relationship. It's really important. I'm just going to mention one thing right here to the audience. I started working on a relationship with Cheryl last year, and glad that I did, because I'm glad that Cheryl's here for Ceipal Connect. If I never reached out to her a year ago, it's much less likely that she'd be here today. And oh, by the way, it's Cheryl that introduced me to David. I'm very glad to get to know David, and hopefully we're going to get to know each other a lot better as time goes on. It's a digital world. Don't forget about the power of relationship, right? Very much so. There's still human beings that are making decisions. It may be based on data, but human beings on, making decisions about who's being added to programs and who's getting more categories and other things like that, right? So important to know. But then it kind of comes down to, listen, you can be the program manager and my best friend, but you still have to make a business decision. You still have to make a good business decision. And ultimately, it can't be based upon just what I put in an RFI or an RFP or a brochure I give you, or what I put in an email. Real differentiation comes from performance, right? So how can staffing firms show that they can really shine? Shining is performance, right? What's the best way with that, Cheryl?
I think the best way to that is to know what you're going to be measured on. If the MSP or the client doesn't share what their measurements are before the scorecard meeting, you need to ask. I remember long ago running a program and being surprised when a supplier asked me what the scorecard was going to look like. I made it a part of my practice when I was running supplier partnerships to provide the vendor with a copy of the previous scorecard so that they were aware. Now, as I'm launching programs, I make sure that those those measures get announced if they're not within the contract. So know how you're going to be measured before you ever are measured. And then also come prepared to those sessions with your own internal measurements. Maybe they're measuring interviews to hire. Well, you look at your interviews to submissions. Provide them with supporting information as well.
David, where can that information come from? What kind of format can you put in to provide to the MSP or the end client that you're also working this multi-channel approach?
Yeah, well, you're not going to want to duplicate efforts, right? So you're already measuring your KPIs. You already have, as a staffing firm, you have your internal performance metrics. You don't need to run anything additional. We're not trying to add to what you have to do on a daily basis. You all already have a day job. So take what you have, bring that with you, as Cheryl said, and be very prepared. But you also need to be your champion. Nobody else is going to be a champion for you. So it's okay to be your own commercial. Come in and talk about the awards and recognitions that you've received at other clients or other MSPs. It's really important to say, hey, here's what we're seeing in the market. At this client down the street of a similar type skill sets, we're seeing the placement timing is starting to creep up. And here's why we think it is. And here's the solution we put in place to help mitigate that. So not just deliver the numbers, but deliver solutions to help improve the numbers and what you're doing as a staffing firm, that then the MSP says, these people actually know what they're doing, and they kind of know more than 2/3 of the rest of the supply chain. Maybe we need to up their opportunities. That's how this works. But I also want to throw out there, do not go in and ask for more opportunities if you're not already filling the opportunities that you have. Don't ask for more until you, from an MSP's perspective, don't ask for more until you're doing very well with what you already have.
Right.
That's really important.
And
So
the moment you're doing well, ask for more, not only within that client, but within their other clients. And if the person you're speaking with doesn't have the wherewithal to give you more, find out who that is.
Yes.
Okay, so we're really coming close to the conclusion of our session. Let me take a minute for each of you. Maybe if you want to make a kind of summary or a little conclusion statement or key takeaway that you'd like to give to staffing firms on this call, attending our session. David, let me start with you.
Yeah,
we're saving the best for last.
I'm going to flip back to the strategy, right, folks, and financial. Without managing your financials, you don't have a business, and you need to make sure that the new business you are winning or the business you're going after is profitable business. That's really, really important. And unfortunately, many of the staffing firms that we go in and help, it's a situation where they've gone after to get more, but it hasn't been profitable business. So my key takeaway, I think, for this is to really pay attention to the financials, be smart about your business. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to say no, especially if it's in best interest of your organization. And your
not just grow your business with MSP partnerships, but grow your business profitably.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And Cheryl, what's your key takeaway?
I think my key takeaway, would be the relationship. So while you've got covered with David with the strategy is the relationship. It is the world of chairs, and you never know with your MSP partner today where they're going to be tomorrow. And more organizations are taking their programs internally as well. So those are the resources that typically end up working for XYZ company running their contingent workforce program. So once you know your strategy, also keep up with your network and your contacts. We remember who performed well and who didn't for years and years to come.
Great point. I think maybe between the three of us, we're all in different places than we may have been 5 years ago, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So great point. Well, thank you very much, Cheryl. Thank you, David. I know I've already seen in the chat session several people saying they were excited for the session. They learned a lot. It was a great session, great information. Thank you so much. Spring?
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for such a wonderful session today. And thank you so much for our audience to join us. We'd like to let you know our next segment will be our closing notes session. And thank you. So we ask you to just stay in this track and you'll be looped right in once it's about to start. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.